I've been thinking about this in these last few days, and that is the death of Hasbara. Hasbara is dead. Hasbara is dead, and the Jews killed Hasbara. The Israelis have killed him. Now, what is Hasbara? Hasbara it's a word. It simply means propaganda. Propaganda for who, to be specific? It's propaganda for Israel. That is what Hasbara is. Hasbara is Israeli propaganda. Israel has Hasbara agents all over the world, specifically in the Western world. That's where they are the most heavily concentrated. Israel has Hasbara operatives or Hasbara activists all over the internet. I think a lot of these Hasbara activists online are just Indian people looking to get a cut. They're seeking some paycheck from Israel or whatever. But there's over 1 billion people living in India, and a ton of them are pro-Israel. So really, Israel has an endless supply of Hasbaras, thanks to India, thanks to a whole bunch of Latin American countries where you have a lot of people who are pro-Israel as well, thanks to the inundation of evangelical Christianity in South America. And so anyway, there's tons of Hasbaras out there. If you do a video criticizing Israel, even if your videos get really low views, even if your videos are getting like 50 views, you're going to have some pro-Israel person in the comment section, and it'll probably be your only comment, but you're going to get some pro-Israel person in the comment section saying, yeah, you're wrong, this never happens, blah, blah, blah. Here is the problem. You see, Hasbara has existed for decades, and I would say that the golden age of Hasbara was the early 2000s. Now, there were Hasbaras in the 90s, there were Hasbaras in the 80s, there were Hasbaras in the 70s, there were Hasbaras in the 60s. I'm pretty sure that Netanyahu's father was a big major Hasbarist who went to America to push for the United States to back the state of Israel. Hasbara's been around for a very long time. It's been around for decades. I would say at least 7 decades. Or probably more than that, right? More than that. But the golden age of Hasbara, by far, was the early 2000s. Well, why do I say this? One word: 9/11. Is 9/11 a word? I think at this point 9/11 is a word. It's a word unto itself. Like October 7th is now a word unto itself. Right? October 7th. You don't even have to say 2023 anymore. You don't even have to say 2023. You just say October 7th. Everyone knows what you're talking about. Everyone knows what year this event took place. It's become a new word in the vernacular of English speakers, really the vernacular of all of humanity. Everyone knows what you're talking about. But 9/11 sparked the golden age of Hasbara. And in the early 2000s, I want to say at least 85%, maybe even more, of Americans were pro-Israel. And what really, really got a lot more people to become pro-Israel, and what really got people to intensify their pro-Israel sentiments was 9/11. So we got attacked. America got attacked. You had 19 Muslim terrorists hijacked planes. They crashed the planes into the Twin Towers. We've all heard the story. Right now, I mean, and we'll probably get more into this later on, but the official 9/11 narrative is heavily doubted by many Americans. I think you would actually be hard-pressed to find an American who actually believes in the entirety of the 9/11 narrative, the official 9/11 narrative. But anyway, Israel comes along and says, you guys were attacked. This is the fight that we've been dealing with for decades. We've been fighting Muslim terrorists, Islamofascism for the longest time, and now America is dealing with it. Your fight is our fight. We're going to help you Americans out as much as we can. Israel is with America, and America and Israel are in this fight together. So there became this feeling, this sense of solidarity with Israel because of the war on terrorism. America invades Iraq. Saddam Hussein is deemed as a major threat to Israel. Tons of Americans, the great majority, I would just say virtually all Americans, supported the Iraq war because of all of the sense of horror that Americans got from 9/11, and then automatically our U.S. government accused Iraq of somehow being involved in 9/11, even though there was zero evidence for this, and even though it was purely a straight-up lie. We all bought into it because, when you're going through a traumatic event, you're very vulnerable to being lied to. You are very vulnerable to all sorts of manipulation, and that's exactly what happened to the American population. So anyway, people just bought into the let's invade Iraq narrative. Iraq got invaded. Everyone's singing freaking Toby Keith. Everyone's saying we're going to stick a boot up your ass because it's the American way. Shock and awe. People loved it. Shock and Awe was literally being live streamed on television. It was being played in every single American household. We were all watching Shock and Awe live. People were enjoying watching the bombing of Iraq. And Israel was there clapping its hands saying, yes, this is so great. We're fighting the terrorists here in Israel, in the West Bank, in Gaza. America is fighting the terrorists in Iraq. This is a multi-front war. Everyone bought into it. So people were hardcore pro-Israel. And people saw the Palestinian terrorism. People heard the stories of Palestinian suicide bombers. People heard all the stories, all the reports about Palestinian terrorism, Hamas, the PLO, etc., etc. And so we had this huge sense of solidarity with Israel. So the golden era of Hasbara was in the early 2000s. Early 2000s, really the entirety of the 2000s, the great majority of Americans were pro-Israel. Going into the early 2010s, still the pro-Israel sentiment in America maintained itself. Something began to happen in the late 2010s. And so Israel started, I think, to become less popular in the late 2010s, or at least we began to see this precipitous decline, if I could use those two words together. This sudden decline in pro-Israel sentiment began, I would say, in a major way in the late 2010s. I would say 2017, 2018, around there. Still, the great majority of Americans were pro-Israel then, but there was indeed a decline that began. Meanwhile, though, Hasbara was just on third gear. The thing is that the majority of pro-Israel activist propagandists were Americans, or they were evangelical Christians. And by Americans, I mean they were mainly American Jews, or they were American Christians. There were some British people that were involved as well, but the whole Hasbara thing was dominated by pro-Israel Jewish Americans and pro-Israel American evangelical Christians. And they would be on Fox News, they would be on the news, they'd be on MSNBC, CNN. Every single outlet was broadcasting Hasbara. And so we would hear all the talking points, right? Terrorism, this, we got to fight terrorists, etc., etc. So the Hasbara message was very, very effective because the memory of 9/11 and the whole narrative surrounding 9/11 was very fresh in people's minds. And as long as that narrative and as long as that memory was fresh in people's minds, people were going to be very pro-Israel. Fast forward to 17 years later, to the year 2018, and that is when I believe, from my own personal perspective, that is when I believe you begin to see this sudden decline in pro-Israel sentiment. Hasbara was still very strong. Pro-Israel sentiment was still relatively strong, but nonetheless, there was a sudden decline. Fast forward to 2020, during the whole COVID crisis, you begin to see a lot more people criticizing Israel. Now, rewind yourselves a little bit back to, I want to say 2017, 2018. A lot of people are reading John Mearsheimer's book, The Pro-Israel Lobby. And that book really, really contributed to this death of Hasbara. Because what the book did was it explained to Americans in a very succinct and simple way how the Israeli government had undue influence on American foreign policy, how the Israeli government still has this undue influence, how and the book also was quite prophetic. Now, what year did the book come out? I think it came out in 07. 07, I'm correct. So 07, this book comes out. I'm not sure how popular it was when it first came out, but I think the book sold a lot in the late 2010s. And the reason why I say this is because I got that book in 2018, read the whole thing, and as I was reading it, I was actually giving commentary I was actually giving a lot of commentary on the book, and I did a lot of videos on that book. I'm pretty certain I know for certain that I have a lot of those videos stashed inside of an external hard drive. I just need to re-upload those videos. I think those videos were actually really good. Those videos were actually super informative, and a lot of people liked them. And I noticed that a lot of people were watching my videos. I'm not talking like millions of views or even hundreds of thousands of views, but I saw a boost in my viewership. I'll just put it that way. And I noticed that a lot of people were really agreeing with me. Whereas if I were to do those videos in '08, '09, '07, I probably would have gotten a lot more criticism. I probably would have gotten a lot more backlash from audience members. But in 2018, I remember doing multiple videos on the Israel lobby, and a lot of people were agreeing with me. So I began to notice this sudden shift. Now, just to give you guys further, more of a foundation from where I'm coming from, I was brought up with Hasbara. I was raised with Hasbara. I was raised in Zionism. My father was a Zionist. My father was a big influencer in the Zionist movement in the United States. And so I was raised on Hasbara. And I was around Hasbaras. I went to meetings with Hasbaras. I went to dinner events with Hasbaras. I hung out. I mean, I've actually been to John Hagee's house. Yes, if you can believe it. Many years ago, back in 2006, I believe, I actually went to John Hagee's house. There were Zionists everywhere. There were Israelis that were there. And it was a big, fat dinner party. They had live music. They had these 6 Israeli guys who were singing opera. It was really cringe. Now, at that time, it didn't seem cringe, but if I had to define cringe, I would say that cringe is actually just secondhand embarrassment. That's how I think that's the best way that I personally can define cringe. But they were doing opera and they were singing "All We Want Is Peace." Well, they were doing that at the event. We had a pro-Israel event, and they actually saying in opera style, "All we want is peace." And okay. And then we were at this giant dinner party, and there were all these pro-Israel people that were there. There was a lot of, they were all Zion. Everyone there was a Zionist, obviously. And then there was just a lot of, it was all Hasbara. Like the whole damn thing was Hasbara. So I've always had this mental gauge of Hasbara. I've always had a sense of it. I've always had an awareness of its existence. And so I kind of, for the longest time, I've been feeling the vibes of Hasbara. And I can tell you right now that in the early 2000s, Hasbara was very strong. In the early 2010s, Hasbara was very strong. In the late 2010s, Hasbara began to decline a little bit. And right now, I'm seeing Hasbara just dying. Now, it's not dead completely, but it's dying. It's on its way to death. Now, why do I say this? Because a lot of people have knowledge, or they have at least some sort of an awareness of the Israel lobby. Because one of the biggest death blows to America was the Iraq War. This has been the biggest embarrassment for the American empire. The Iraq War truly was the biggest embarrassment in our history. Because the Iraq War showed that the most powerful military in the world could not out-stubborn Iraqis. The most powerful military in the world could not prevent the American population from being exhausted in war, even though it was fighting in a third world country against a bunch of insurgents with little to no training. And so it was the biggest embarrassment for the American empire ever. Biggest blow to the American empire. And it destroyed our enthusiasm for foreign policy. It destroyed our morale for foreign policy. It destroyed any sort of modicum of interest that we may have had for war. It just killed off the whole thing. Like we're not interested in wars. That's why Donald Trump and Biden and all these last 2 presidents that's why Donald Trump right now and Biden, both of these presidents have been very careful. Biden was very careful for his foreign policy. Yes, he supported Ukraine, but he never said we're going to have boots on the ground. He pulled out of Afghanistan. Why did he pull out of it? Why did he pull out of Afghanistan? Because America is tired of war. We're seeing the breakdown of the empire. And what do they call Afghanistan? They call Afghanistan the place where empires die. I mean, this has been an infamous an infamous saying amongst historians for a long, long time, right? I mean, Afghanistan is the place where empires die. And the British had a terrible time in Afghanistan. The Soviet Union had a terrible time in Afghanistan, and it was in Afghanistan where the Soviet Union really began to break down, and it was in Afghanistan where the Americans armed Mujahideen fighters to cripple the strength of the Soviet Union. And so the Soviet Union began to die in Afghanistan. The British Empire began to die in Afghanistan. And America kind of went through the same process. So America pulls out of Afghanistan. Donald Trump enters office for the second time. And he enters office on what sort of marketing gimmick? On what sort of marketing point? No more wars. And you have so you have this fatigue from war, right? Americans are fatigued from war. They're just, we're done with it. That's it. Done. Please, no more. And then add to that the knowledge or the awareness of the pro-Israel lobby. So not only do you have fatigue from war, but you have resentment against the American government, or you have resentment for the pro-war figureheads, people like Lindsey Graham, people like all the people who were pro-war. George Bush, Cheney, you have Rumsfeld, right? You have a resentment towards all of these people. And so you have resentment towards those people. On top of that, you have fatigue from war. And then add on that the awareness of the Israel lobby. Now, if you haven't read The Israel Lobby by John Mearsheimer, I would highly recommend that you read that book because it is very informative, I will say. Super informative read. And he gets into, hair-splitting detail on the Israel lobby. He doesn't just give you a generalization. He doesn't just say, oh yeah, there's the Israel lobby and they're just pro-Israel and that was it, right? He doesn't just give you a few facts here or there. He gives you 100 or probably hundreds of facts proving that there really is indeed a pro-Israel lobby. And he shows how the Israel lobby convinced the U.S. government to go to war. He shows how the Israelis provided false intelligence, trying to prove that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and that Saddam was a threat to the United States. And then once the Iraq war was actually being done, once it was put into effect and we realized, this whole thing's a disaster, the Israelis came out and said, whoops, we did a whoopsie, mistakes were made, sorry, my bad, sorry. And the pro-Israel sentiment in the American population was still very high because people still weren't putting the dots together. So at one point, people started buying this book, The Israel Lobby. People began to read about it. People began to listen to Alex Jones a lot more. And Alex Jones, here's the thing. This is another sign that Hasbara is dying. Alex Jones, guys, used to be seen as comedic material. People used to watch Alex Jones for a laugh. I used to watch, when I was in, I don't want to say high school, but when I got out of high school, not too long after I got out of high school, I used to listen to Alex Jones because it was funny. That's all this dude is funny. Why is he funny? Because he's saying a bunch of stuff that sounds crazy, right? And I'll never forget this moment. I remember in 2010 going to a Barnes & Noble because I wanted to increase my knowledge of history. I wanted to increase my knowledge of the world. And I realized in 2010 that my knowledge wasn't as great as I thought it was. I was knowledgeable on certain things. I understood certain things, but I wanted to expand my knowledge, which is always a good thing. No one knows everything. That's impossible. So, of course, there's always things to learn, right? No one knows everything. That's impossible. So I realized, hey, I need to expand my knowledge. I need to expand my computer system. So I went to Barnes & Noble. I remember I collected $200 worth of coins. I converted the coins into cash, and I said, I got $200. And I had been collecting those coins for a long time. Put it all through a coin machine, realized, oh my God, I got $200. That's a lot of money to spend on books. Went to Barnes & Noble, and I bought a bunch of books. Now, I bought Herodotus. I bought Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I bought those two books. I remember. I bought some other stuff. I don't remember exactly, but I didn't buy the Pro-Israel Lobby. I should have bought that book. But I remember going outside and seeing. Now, I went to the register, and there was this lady behind the register, right? Older lady, probably in her late 60s. She scanned the books for me. I paid the money, all that stuff. Then I went outside, and she came out. All right, she came outside, and she was having a cigarette break. So she's sitting at this bench. I take a seat on the bench. We start talking, and she's smoking her cigarette, and she says, I'll never forget this conversation. She said, they want to ban smoking. And I said, yeah, I know. She says, I can tell you right now, it ain't got nothing to do with health. And I said, oh, really? What is it then? She goes, it's about control. It's about power. She says, they just want to control us. And they're just trying to find any way to find reasons to control us. It's all about control. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. I said, I agree with you. The reason why I said that is because my dad would tell me the same exact thing. My dad's a enthusiastic smoker. And she said, that's what they all keep saying. I listened to that Alex Jones, and he's been warning people for decades about the New World Order, and that's what that's about. The New World Order is all about control. Now, this was in 2010, and here I am meeting an older American lady, and she's telling me about the New World Order and how she loves Alex Jones, and she's listening to Alex Jones. I'm thinking, wow, and that was the first time I ever met an Alex Jones listener. And I remember thinking to myself, I agree with this lady, but why is she listening to Alex Jones for serious news content? I mean, you see, at that time, I would listen to the news, or I would read the news to learn about the news. I would never watch Alex Jones or listen to Alex Jones to actually get the news. And Alex Jones was, you guessed it correctly. Alex Jones was a critic of Israel. And I remember Alex Jones calling Israel, many years ago, basically a glorified American airstrip. This is how he described Israel many years ago. I remember listening to him many years ago, and he said, well, Israel is just a glorified American airstrip. That's all it is. And I thought, wow, that's a terrible thing to say. What do you mean? Israel is the land of the Jewish people. It's God's land. How could Alex Jones say that? It's a glorified American airstrip. But even at that time, I thought about it, and I thought, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, it's a small strip of land. I mean, there's a lot of American military activity that goes on there. So, it does make sense that the Americans would use Israel as a glorified base of military operations. Yeah, absolutely. But Alex Jones was very critical of Israel. And then what happened when Obama was president, especially during his second term? What happened during Obama's second term, guys? Alex Jones became a serious media outlet for millions of Americans. Alex Jones had this precipitous rise in fame that was unlike anything I've ever seen. And to this day, I can't find any examples of someone rising in fame like the example of Alex Jones. And why do I say that? Because, like I said earlier, Alex Jones was watched for comedic purposes. He was funny to listen to. He was talking about this Israel and the lobby, and he was talking about all that stuff. He was talking about Epstein and this, and they're doing experiments on this and that and this, right? And we all thought he was just making shit up. A lot of people thought, like, this guy's just making stuff up. Right? This was how a lot of people saw Alex Jones. This dude's just making stuff up. And then when Obama was the president for the second term, I remember there was the Syrian civil war, and a lot of people were talking about how the Obama administration was arming terrorists. And people didn't really realize that had been a part of American foreign policy for a long time. But we were realizing at this point that the Iraq war was bullshit and that it was a terrible idea, that it was evil, that it was destructive, and that it had killed over 1 million people senselessly, which is horrendously tragic. And we were waking up out of the Hasbara-induced psychosis that was brought about to us due to 9/11, that was enabled by 9/11. So we're waking up, right? Our brains were all fogged up by Hasbara. Our brains were all fogged up by Israeli propaganda. That's what Hasbara means. And we were still brain fogged by the war on terror. And then all of a sudden, we're realizing, okay, the Iraq war was bullshit. No more of these bullshit wars. That's why we voted for Obama. And then we hear about America getting involved in another bullshit Middle Eastern war. And not only is it just any Middle Eastern country, it's literally Syria. It's right next to Iraq. It's like we're going from Iraq to Syria right next door. Like a freaking domino effect. A game of dominoes. And then all of a sudden, people started hearing about Wesley Clark talking about how America had this plan that was set up back in the 90s, or maybe even earlier than that, in which the United States would topple the regimes of Iraq, Egypt, Syria, Libya, and Iran. And that the toppling of these governments was of the desire of America for the sake of Israel. So people started figuring this stuff out. And I remember writing about this stuff back in 2011. So people are, for decades, they just had brain fog. 9/11 made the fog even thicker. And then all of a sudden, people just started waking up out of it. Like, okay, this Iraq war stuff is bullshit, guys. What the hell's going on? And then we're hearing about Obama giving weapons to Syrian rebels, Syrian terrorists. What the hell? What? Since when? Well, since forever. You just didn't see it because your vision was being clouded by Hasbara. So people started hating Obama. Obama became unpopular. And then people started watching Alex Jones. Now, a lot of this was due to social media and how media began to change in the 2010s, right? Really seriously began to change. Social media really started entrenching itself in modern society, and people started just getting their news off of social media as opposed to opening a newspaper or actually going onto a news website. And this trend commenced, and the train was set at this point. It wasn't stopping. All of a sudden, in the 2010s, I want to say 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, those years, Alex Jones blows up at a absolutely precipitous rate. He goes from being a court gesture to being seen as serious media. And by court gesture, I'm just talking about how people perceived him. He went from being perceived as a court gesture, as a clown, to being seen as serious media. His videos were getting millions upon millions of views. The guy was making mad money, understandably so. He was selling, like, I don't know, Viagra or whatever. He was selling supplements. And my phone is ringing. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I hope you guys don't hear that. Oh, someone picked it up. Never mind. So, this is how all this begins. And Alex Jones is talking about Israel. And people are like, wait, what's going on? What do you mean, Israel? What? Israel's behind this? What the hell? What's going on? What? And then people start buying the Israel lobby. I was one of those people. Now, I began to become disillusioned with Hasbara. I would say, let me think here. Let me think, because this goes back. I would say the seeds of disillusionment were sown. I'm not going to say that I became full-blown disillusioned with Hasbara at this point, but the seeds were sowed and they began to germinate, albeit very slowly. I would say in like 2007 or 8. What began the sowing was not the news. It wasn't a book. It wasn't Alex Jones. It was something else. What began the journey of me beginning very slowly, I want to make that very clear because I don't want to give this impression that I had an awakening in one moment. No. People change their position not in a day, not in an hour. People don't change their position overnight. People change their position after a very gradual process, long and gradual process. But I began to see the behavior of the Hasbarist. The behavior of the Hasbarist was very nasty. It was disgusting. Now, in front of cameras, it was, oh, glory to Israel. We got to help people, and we got to help people in Israel fight terrorism, the American people. Once the cameras were off, they would treat other people like slaves. They would treat other people like slaves. I'm going to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. There was a big Hasbara event. I'm not going to give names just to prevent any sort of complicated situations here. But I'm going to give you guys the story without giving you guys names. So there was a big Hasbara event, and the organizer of the Hasbara event, pro-Israel, Zionist, the whole thing, he says, okay, I want to have this event. We're going to do this event, right? And thousands of people were going to show up. It was going to be a big-ass event. Now, mind you, this was back in like 2007 when Hasbara was still very big. So the organizer for the event invites my father to speak. My dad says, okay, right, fine. They advertised the event for a week, and they're telling everyone, Walid Shobat's going to be there, my father. My father was a celebrity at this point. He was a celebrity in American Christian circles. He was a big celebrity in American Zionist circles. He was known in Israel. And what happened was that they would advertise the event, and they would say, Walid Shobat's going to come. A lot of people loved my father, so a lot of people bought tickets to this event. They sold out the tickets, sold a ton of tickets. Tons of people were going to come. It's going to be a big event. And then, just maybe 3 days before the event, they canceled my father. And they replaced my father with Joseph Lieberman. And they said, yeah, we've decided not to have you come to the event, even though we've been using you to sell tickets. We used you to sell tickets. And then, in the last moment, we really want to, and this was the organizers doing for the most part. The organizer basically said, I really wanted to help my friend Joseph Lieberman. And so I invite Joseph Lieberman to replace you. But we just used you to sell tickets. And I watched as my father was mistreated by these people. And I saw the reality. It was a big money-making business. Now, in front of people, in front of cameras, they were the nicest people in the world. You would never suspect that these people were evil, sinister, corrupt, scandalous scoundrels. You would never suspect this by their behavior at the surface level, right? At the surface level. But if there's one thing that you should know about psychopaths, is that psychopaths can not only be very nice, but they also have, not all of them, but they can have exceptionally good social skills. They can be very articulate. They can be very good at having conversation. They can talk in a way that feels very welcoming and inviting to the point where you want to talk to them. Now, I'm not saying all people who are like this are psychopaths. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that a psychopath has the ability to flip a switch in his mind to where he is a really good conversationalist. And I'm just saying this is a reason why you should be careful before trusting someone a little bit too quickly. The psychopath has a switch. Now, normal people can usually be read like an open book, right? I'm just saying this from my own experience. You can read me like a book. The way that I'm talking to you guys right now, this is how I am in real life, for the most part. The way I'm talking to you guys, this is how we talk. This is how I talk, right? My feelings, my opinions can be can be perceived very quickly just by my words and my facial expressions. I'm very open about how I am and what I believe in and how I feel about things. I'm a Mediterranean at the end of the day. But a psychopath, he can act super nice, super friendly, super cordial. He can be an extremely good conversationalist. And then he can turn that off after he's gotten your guard down enough, and he can ambush you. He can ambush you by attacking you physically. He can ambush you by attacking your character. He can ambush you by trying to destroy your reputation, by screwing you over, by backstabbing you. So I began to see these behaviors in the Hasbara movement. And what I saw happening to my dad in that specific instance was the beginning. That was the first time that I had seen something like that. And my father was explaining this to me. He was saying, this is what they did to me. He said, they know that I have a big name. They know that I am popular in the Zionist/American evangelical circles. They made a commercial for the event saying, Walid Shubat's coming. That got a lot of people excited. They sold a bunch of tickets. Then they cancel my engagement about 3 days before the event. They got their ticket sales, so they just canceled my dad and replaced him with Joseph Lieberman. Joseph Lieberman is a very boring speaker. If you don't believe me, just look up Joseph Lieberman on YouTube. You will see the guy is one of the worst speakers ever. They knew this. They knew, listen, you're not going to get a lot of ticket sales by just saying, Joseph Lieberman's coming to town. So they used my father. Because at this point, my dad was a celebrity in American Christian circles. And that's what they did. So this was the beginning. And a little seed was sown in my soul. And that seed began to germinate, albeit it began to germinate not like a bean sprout. Beans germinate and grow very quickly. It didn't begin to germinate like a Brussels sprout plant, which also germinates very quickly. Or what germinates and grows very quickly. Any sort of bean, any sort of kale. Right? The seed wasn't sown and it didn't germinate quickly. I mean, it was sown quickly, but it didn't germinate quickly. It germinated and grew like an olive seed. If you try to grow an olive seed, in order to get a tree, this is why cucumber grows very fast. Yeah. If you wanted olives, and you wanted to grow an olive tree from seed, and so you got an olive seed, and you planted it in the ground, it would be, and I'm not exaggerating, it would be at least a decade before you actually got a tree. You wouldn't even get fruit at this point, but just to get a tree would require at least a decade of time. That's how slow the germination process was, but nonetheless, it was germinating. Nonetheless, it was growing. So I began to see other behaviors, right? Other things that really bothered me. For example, the mistreatment of employees. Yes, I'll give you guys an example. There was a Hasbara, you know what? I'm just going to say his name because this guy was a big celebrity. Are any of you guys familiar with Zola Levitt? Is anyone here familiar with Zola Levitt? Yes, that Joseph Lieberman. You are correct, Alexis Corel. Is anyone here familiar with Zola Levitt? Okay. Zola Levitt, yes, olives do take that long. That's why no one grows olives from seed. Everyone just grows olives by just buying a tree that's already mature, and then they just grow the damn thing. Zola Levitt was, at one point in time, a huge, massive celebrity. He was a massive celebrity back in the 90s and the early 2000s. He had a giant show. I think it was called Zola Levitt Ministry or something like that. Zola Levitt Presents. I don't remember. And Zola Levitt was a massive Hasbarist in America. He was a massive Hasbarist in America. He had a very popular show, and a lot of people watched him. and he had a really, I mean, he had a big thing going for him, right? I mean, he had a very successful show, and his entire program was dedicated to talking about Israel and the Bible. That was his entire program. His entire program was dedicated to telling people why they needed to support Israel and why God wanted them to be pro-Israel. And he would do these really cringe reenactments. You can watch them on YouTube. He would try to dress up like a biblical character, and he would play a flute, and he would go to Israel, and he'd be in some, I don't know, on the edge of some town in Israel somewhere. And he'd play the flute, and it looked like he was in the. He would go to an olive grove in Israel or something like that. He'd blow the flute and play the flute. It was just real cringe stuff. But people ate that shit up. They ate it up. They loved it. So my father would get invited to the Zoel Levitt show. And I remember my dad being invited to the Zoel Levitt show. And when you watch Zoel Levitt on television, he's not on TV anymore, but if you ever go on YouTube and just watch an episode of Zoel Levitt, one thing you'll see is that Zoel Levitt was really nice in front of the camera. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And he would end each program by saying that. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And he looked like Santa Claus. You ever look him up, Zoel Levitt? He looked like Santa Claus. Fat, jolly Santa Claus. The Jewish Santa Claus. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And he would do that in front of the camera. And he did a really good job on it. It seemed super authentic, super sincere. So my dad, I remember getting invited to the Zoel Levitt show was really exciting for him because my dad was a big fan of the Zoel Levitt show. So my dad goes there. Zoel Levitt shakes my dad's hand. You know, everything's fine, whatever. And they're working on starting the interview, and they're getting the camera set up, and they're doing the procedures, the necessary production procedures. And all of a sudden, Zoel Levitt, and this is what my dad told me. My dad told me, Ted, Zoel Levitt is a monster. The man's a monster. Screaming at his employees all the time, nonstop, constantly berating his employees, constantly insulting his employees, just screaming and micromanaging everything. Just a total narcissistic control freak. And they start the interview, and they do the interview, and my dad told me, he says, Ted, right when the cameras go on, he's a different person. He's the nicest person in the world, smiling in front of the camera, super cordial, very good conversationalist, very good interviewer. And then before the cameras, when the show ends, when the show is about to end, he looks at the camera and goes, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and cut. And he would just, my dad told me, he says, Ted, it was unreal. Soon as the cameras go off, screaming at everyone, what the fuck is this? Oh, the camera, the phone, turn the fan on. Like his whole face would turn. My dad told me, Ted, the guy's a maniac. The guy was a maniac. It was a monster. And they got a guy to drive my dad back to his hotel. And my dad's talking to the driver. And my dad said, what the fuck was that? And the driver said, what was what? And my dad goes, that behavior. He goes, oh, Zola? He says, yeah. He goes, oh, that's what we've been dealing. He goes, that's what we have been dealing with for years with this guy. That is what we have. The guy says, Wally, that's my dad's name. Wally, that is what we have had to deal with for years. This is typical Zola. This is how he is in every recording. This is how he is in every show, every episode. That's what we've been having to deal with for years. And it was just terrible. Like that behavior. And I just saw so much of that growing up. Just saw so much of that. That there is the show for everyone. And the show is smiles and warmth and pray for Israel. We have to stop the bad guys. We're in this together. And then when it was time to go behind the curtains, it was all money and abuse. And again, another seed was sown. Another olive seed was sown. Okay, well, here is another example of what we have had to witness. Right, here's another example of this behavior. And there was another hospice that I knew, who I met personally, and big Zionist, Hasbara. I'm not going to give out any names, but this guy, I went to a restaurant with him, and he just starts abusing the waiter. He starts abusing the restaurant staff. Not physically, but just verbally abusing people. Oh, this is, the meal came out wrong. That's not the steak that I ordered. And blah, 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 right? And I just saw so much of that. And you think, okay, maybe this is a one-time thing. And then I went to another restaurant with him. Same thing. The order always came out wrong. The staff was always at fault. The restaurant was always garbage. The order came out wrong. The food had to be sent back. Send the food back. No, this is not the guy who got an extra meal. This is a different person. Different person. Send this back. I'm not joking. I went to several restaurants with this individual. It was this, even freaking McDonald's got this guy's bullshit. Even McDonald's. The fries are, what's wrong with these fries? What's wrong with this, the Big Mac? Dude, we are in a McDonald's at 9:30 at night in the middle of Houston. What do you expect? Freaking 3 Michelin star chef tier stuff here? Like, dude, just calm down. Enough. This little minority kid's running around in the middle of a McDonald's. This food is terrible. Nothing. It's not the same guy. Nothing was good. Nothing was right. Everything had to be micromanaged. Everything has to be controlled. And I began to realize this is a spiritual, psychological condition where the person needs to control everything. And the person needs to always feel like he is in control. And I just saw so much of this behavior. I could give you guys more stories, but yes, there was another story, and I told this story before, but there was another guy that I knew, pro-Israel guy, and we go to a restaurant, and he orders a steak, okay, whatever, the steak comes, doesn't like the steak. That's not what he tells the waiter, that's not what I ordered. What? Yeah, that's not what I ordered. What? What are you talking about? Yeah, I didn't order that. He did order that, by the way, but he lies to the waiter and says, I didn't order that. Really? Yeah, I didn't order that. So he gaslights the waiter, making him think that there was a mistake that was made by the restaurant when there was no mistake made by the restaurant. And the waiter takes the steak off the table. And all of a sudden, the manager pops up. And you know how American service... Okay, listen. If you guys aren't American, if you've never been to America or Canada, because Canada has similar restaurant service... if you have not experienced American food service, you have to experience it at least once in your life. It is something truly to behold because restaurant service, in comparison to the rest of the earth, restaurant service in America is the greatest thing ever. That is probably declining, but again, this was the early 2000s when American service was still very, very good. I mean, it's still good, don't get me wrong, but it has declined a little bit. And I don't think that's the fault of restaurants. I think that's more of the fault of just really shitty customers and restaurants getting sick of dealing with bullshit. Manager comes over, he gets on one knee for this guy. I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. And this Hasbara guy, this Zionist guy, he was this, did you guys ever see the film Jurassic Park? Not the new stuff, but the original Jurassic Park, the first Jurassic Park movie. Remember the guy that gets eaten in his car? He's the dude from I think he was in Seinfeld, I don't remember. But he's the dude who gets eaten in his car, big fat guy with glasses. He's the hacker that Samuel Jackson got frustrated with. Okay, imagine that dude. That's pretty much how this guy looked like, except the hair was a little bit different and he was a little bit shorter maybe. But other than that, I'm trying to give you guys the best example that I can think of so that you guys can picture this moment in your heads. That's what the fat guy from Jurassic Park who gets eaten in his car. Stick, stupid. What? Stick, stupid. What? No, no wonder you're extinct, right? That's this guy. And he's like, oh, stick. It's like, the dude don't want stick. He wants food, and you're the food. So this guy, he says, the manager comes, gets on his knee, and I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. And he goes, I didn't order that. That's not what I ordered. That's not what I ordered. I ordered something else. That's not what I got. Well, what did you order, sir? I ordered a porterhouse steak, and that's not what I got. You know what, sir? To make it up to you. This is American Service. By the way, American Service was really, really good. It was supreme. It's still the best in the world, don't get me wrong. But it was really, really good. It was even better than it is now. But it has declined somewhat due to customers like this. This is the reason why. You want to know why American Service has declined? Just listen to this story. That's why. Well, sir, not only will I give you the porterhouse steak, I will give you anything you want from the menu, free of charge. You can get another meal on us. Pick anything you want out of the menu, on us, free of charge. Really? Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, sir. So he gets a new steak, and he gets one thing out of the menu of his choice, free of charge. So he gets an hors d'oeuvre or whatever. I forgot what he got. He got something. He eats everything. And then he looks at me and he says, Theodore, did you see what I did there? What did you do? I got myself a free meal. And I said, wait, you did that on purpose just to get a free meal? So this was part of a conspiracy? He goes, yeah. I got myself a free meal. See what I did there? You see that? He says, Theodore, you should try it. Try what? Just do what I just did. You'll get yourself a free meal. And you'll get yourself an adrenaline rush. An adrenaline rush? Yeah, it's exciting. I got an adrenaline rush out of that. When the manager came and got on his knee like that, I got an adrenaline rush. And I'm thinking, there's something deeply, deeply wrong with these people. Deeply wrong. I saw racism, scoundrel behavior, backstabbing behavior, thieving behavior, and every moment like this, every experience like this pushed me closer and closer to the edge of just saying fuck Hasbara and fuck this whole thing, to hell with it. Right, to hell with it. Just all these behaviors. So then one day, it was the year 2018, and I'm not going to give any names, but basically some Zionist, a number of Zionists, got upset with me because I was criticizing Israel and blah, 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 and there was a whole spat. And one of them decides to basically hack through my website and shut it down. And for a month and a half, my website didn't exist. And I said, this is the last straw. This is it. This is it. This is like Iran standing up and saying, listen, Israel, you've been killing our nuclear scientists for decades. You've been doing assassinations. You've been bombing our ally Syria. And now you've attacked our consulate in Syria. That's it. We're bombing Tel Aviv. I mean, like, it was at that point, right? It was at that level of just having enough. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. This was the boiling point. This was the breaking point. This was the fucking point. I should stop saying the F word, guys. This was the point where I just said, all right, I'm done. 2018. I'm done. I've been spending a huge chunk of my life supporting Israel. I debated people in high school about Israel. I wrote articles. I don't remember any articles that I wrote, to be honest with you. But I wrote in favor of Israel in a book many years ago. I've done pro-Israel stuff. I spoke at pro-Israel events, right? To be mistreated like a freaking subhuman. Enough. And I began to realize, wait a second. Hold on. It's good for health. Yeah, the F word is good for health. You're right, actually. Hold on one second. The West Bank, where much of my family comes from, has been occupied. People are getting mistreated by settlers. And at this point, I had been reading about the settlement movement and all this stuff, right? And the Palestinians are getting occupied, and the settlers are mistreating them, and the settlers, and everyone says, oh, this is about terrorism, this is about fighting Islamic terror, Islamofascism. And remember that bullshit term that was coined after 9/11? Islamofascism. They're fascist, these people. And I began to think, they mistreat Palestinians, the settlers do. They mistreat the Palestinians. They attack the Palestinians. They will steal goats from Palestinians. They'll cut down people's olive groves. Do you know how long it takes to grow an olive tree to the point where it's actually giving you fruit? It takes decades before you get serious harvests out of an olive tree. And these assholes, these terrorists, these criminals, scoundrels, are cutting down people's olive trees. And they'll say, well, it's because of Islamic terrorism. That's why. This is a response to Islamic terrorism. And the common response that you would get at this time, and you'll still get this kind of bullshit response, is, listen, I don't support that kind of behavior, but you have to understand, this is after decades of dealing with Muslim violence. And then you find out that settlers attack Christians. Wait a second. If it's about Islamofascism, and if it's about Islamic terrorism, why are they attacking Christians? Then you realize it has nothing to do with Islam. In fact, a lot of Jewish people praise Islam. In fact, tons of Jewish, even people on the hard right in Israel, will say good things about Islam. Because Islam and Judaism, I'm sorry, newsflash, they're kind of similar. This has nothing to do with Islam. This has something to do with racism. And just hating on people because they're not Jewish. And so during this whole month and a half battle for my website, and there was a legal battle. I'm not going to get into serious details, but there was a legal battle, and we ended up getting our website back in operation and everything. But I remember telling myself, holy shit, I'm getting occupied. I mean, I'm not even living in the West Bank. I'm living in America, and I'm under occupation. I'm being occupied. And I remember telling myself, we got to do an intifada. A cyber intifada, nonetheless, but we got to do ourselves a little intifada. Cyber intifada. Not a real intifada. Cyber one. Holy shit, I'm the one getting occupied. And this whole time I thought these people were our friends, and we're pro-Israel, and we're doing the Hava, Galila Hava, and no. We're being occupied. And as long as we played these people's tunes, they were our friends. And the moment we have a disagreement on Israel, on religion, on Christianity versus Judaism, the moment we start having any sort of disagreement and we're no longer playing their tune, we become the enemy. And all of a sudden, you're a terrorist. All of a sudden, because I criticized Israel, or I said something about Israel, or I said, hey, listen, some of these settlers, they're getting kind of out of hand. I mean, let's be real here. The moment I started saying things like this, all of a sudden, I started being accused of what? Being accused of being a terrorist sympathizer. All of a sudden, I'm a terrorist. All of a sudden, I'm Hamas. All of a sudden, I'm these bad guys because I criticized Israel. And I remember it was the year 2018, and I said, this is it. Fuck it. Shots fired. We're at war. And I got myself Mearsheimer's book. And this was before the website got shut down, but still the war was ongoing. I got Mearsheimer's book, and I read the shit out of that book. Took notes, underlined all sorts of stuff, I would fold the little dog. I would make little dog ears on the pages as bookmarks. I mean, all sorts. I was doing videos on this stuff, and by doing these videos, the struggle, the battle got aggravated, and then the website got shut down. I said, "Fuck it, we're still gonna read this book. I'm still gonna learn from this book. I'm still gonna read about this stuff." And then when the website got back on, I continued on. And that was when Hasbara just was dead to me. But I noticed that there were a lot of people that were agreeing with me, and they were saying, "Yeah, you're right. And I began to notice that a lot of people were seeing what I was seeing. The Israel lobby and the settlers and the evils of Israel and all this stuff. And the tree had finally bore fruit. The tree that was sown in my soul from seed was finally growing fruit. And Hasbara was dead to me, really, at this point. And when October the 7th happened, I did a bunch of videos condemning Hamas because I saw the videos of Hamas butchering Jewish people, and I hated that, and I still hate that. And I did videos not because I was like super pro-Israel or anything like that. I did those videos out of humanity because I truly didn't like what I was seeing Hamas doing. I didn't. It was war crimes. It was truly war crimes what Hamas did. And Hamas should be prosecuted. Hamas should be put on trial and should be found guilty of war crimes for what happened on October the 7th. But then I saw what the Israeli government was doing in Gaza as a response. The thousands of people dead, the tens of thousands of people dead, the war crimes, sniping civilians, shooting elderly people, murdering elderly folks, shooting, and then using human beings as human shields, using Palestinian civilians as human shields. And I saw that bullshit. And I said, no, you are not, Israel. You are not just going to be doing a million October the 7th because October the 7th happened and not have us notice what you're doing. That's just not going to happen. You can't be doing these war crimes and not allow the world or think that the world is not going to notice what you're doing. Obviously, the world is going to notice what you're doing. And it doesn't matter that October the 7th happened. October the 7th was terrible. And I'm never going to change my mind on that because I saw the videos. But it doesn't matter how terrible October the 7th was. It does not justify what Israel has been freaking doing these past 20 months. It doesn't justify it. You don't get to do another October the 7th or a freaking million October the 7th because October the 7th happened to you. Just because Japan attacked Pearl Harbor doesn't mean that I can read about war crimes done to Japanese civilians and think, oh, well, they asked for it. Like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to play that bullshit game. And so I remember not too long, just a number of days after October the 7th, I did a video. You can still see this video. And it was basically, the title was something like Evil in Gaza, it was Evil in Israel or something like that. And I said, guys, this is what's going to happen. And I'm not saying that I'm a genius for figuring this out. I mean, anyone who's been observing the situation in the Middle East figured this out. I said, here's what's going to happen. Jewish extremism is going to explode. And I was right. And I'm not saying I'm a genius for that. It was very obvious, but I was right. And I knew that Jewish extremism was going to blow up. And the reason why I knew that was because I've always, not always, but for the longest time now, I have been critical of Israel. And so I understood. I've been aware of the evils of Israel for a long time now. And so I knew. I saw. And I foresaw that Jewish extremism was going to blow up. And I remember, just seeing all the stories of the war crimes. And you knew that Hasbara was pretty much dying when you saw these massive demonstrations for Gaza in the Western world. Massive demonstrations in the UK. 1 million man march in the UK for Gaza, not for Israel, for Gaza. Massive demonstration in Greece. I forgot the exact number of those who demonstrated in Greece for Gaza, but it was in a massive, massive number. huge numbers of people in Greece, huge demonstrations in Spain, huge demonstrations in the United States, huge demonstrations in Australia. And then I saw the pro-Israel rallies that were being done around the same time. Little small crowd in Australia, little small crowd in the UK, a few hospitalists with signs, oh, I'm not 10-7, oh, it's so terrible. And that's pretty much what Hasbara got reduced to. That's what it got reduced to. And you know what? Fuck them. I don't really feel sorry for them. You know why I don't feel sorry for them? I feel sorry for the Israeli civilians who were killed in the kibbutzim. I don't feel sorry for the hospitalists. You know why I don't feel sorry for the hospitalists? Because for so damn long, they have been gaslighting the world. For so damn long, they have been gaslighting people. Now, why do I say this? You had the war in Iraq. Israeli intelligence played a huge contributing factor to the war in Iraq. And people said, listen, look, Israel gave us false intelligence, and that goaded us into war. And Israel didn't send one damn soldier to help us. And all these thousands of U.S. soldiers died, over 1 million Iraqis dead. And there was Israel clapping its hands. What the hell, Israel? And then all the hospitalists came out. The hospitalists came out, and they said, oh, no, Israel had nothing to do with that. No. So that was gaslighting right there. And then you see the Syrian situation. Wait a second. Terrorists are being armed in Syria. They're butchering Christians. They're butchering Shiites. They're butchering other Muslim Sunnis who disagree with them. They're killing people for supporting the Bashar al-Assad regime. This is a nightmare. And then you saw Israel clapping its hands. And you saw the rise of ISIS as a result of the Iraq war. You saw all the chaos in Syria as a result of the Iraq war, which was pushed by Israel. And then you saw ISIS hanging people from meat hooks, lighting people on fire, drowning people alive. And then you hear the story about ISIS accidentally hitting Israel and then making an apology to Israel. And then you hear about ISIS condemning Hamas. Why is ISIS condemning Hamas? You would think they would be friends, but they're not. What's going on here? And people begin to put the dots together. There's a NATO-Israeli conspiracy taking place here. But no, we were told that was anti-Semitic. We were told that's all anti-Semitism. In fact, to give you guys an actual example of what I mean, I am almost done reading the book written by Deborah Lipstadt on Holocaust denialism. Now, to give credit to where credit is due, the book is really good at teaching you the history of Holocaust denialism, right? You learn about where it came from, when it began, who were the pioneers behind Holocaust denialism. You learn all this stuff reading Deborah Lipstadt's book on Holocaust denialism. But nearing the end of the book, or sort of getting close to the last stage of the book, Deborah Lipstadt starts doing this thing that I found kind of aggravating. And that is, she'll start talking about people who are talking about the pro-Israel lobby. And she'll say, yeah, these Holocaust deniers started talking about the pro-Israel lobby. As if to say that to talk about the pro-Israel lobby would put someone, would make someone akin to a Holocaust denier. As if to say that to talk about the pro-Israel lobby was anti-Semitic. That's bullshit. And yeah, I don't like Holocaust denialism. I did a whole video condemning Holocaust denialism as really insane and dumb. But to try to make this association between Holocaust denialism and talking about the pro-Israel lobby, I think is just bad faith. Yes, people who deny the Holocaust will talk about the pro-Israel lobby. The reason why they talk about the pro-Israel lobby is because they have bad intentions. They want people to hate Jews. That is their agenda. But John Mearsheimer has been talking about the pro-Israel lobby going back to the early 2000s. He's not an anti-Semite. He's not a Holocaust denier. We can talk about the Israel lobby without being anti-Semitic and without being anti-Semites. That distinction can be made. But back in the day, and people accused me of being an anti-Semite. People accuse me, yes, the one who has been debating Nazis, the one who has been exposing the revival of Nazism, the one who has been doing videos on the revival of Nazism, the one who has been writing tons of articles on the revival of Nazism. Yes, they accused me of being an anti-Semite. I have been accused of being an anti-Semite numerous times. Why? Because I talked about the pro-Israel lobby, and I've criticized Israel. And I've been accused of being an anti-Semite. It's a bullshit accusation. And so That was another form of gaslighting, right? You're anti-Semitic, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. That's all fake. There is no pro-Israel lobby. Oh, come on, that's an anti-Semitic trope. But then more and more people begin to learn about this stuff. They begin to read Mearsheimer. They begin to look at articles on the subject matter, how Israel did play a huge role in the war in Iraq. And then we see Gaza. And just the fact that Israel has dropped the equivalent of a nuclear bomb on this region. You see how Israeli politicians and Israeli influencers, media influencers, have been pushing for a genocide of the Palestinians. And you see all of this. And then the smoking gun that happened recently. Haaretz publishes a smoking gun report stating that Israeli soldiers have indeed been shooting at people who are simply trying to get to aid distribution centers to get some food because they're desperate and starving. I have never seen, a Hasbara refute that article. Never. Do you know what they do? They gaslight. And I've seen this numerous times. I've seen this with Emily Schrader. Emily Schrader, big-time Hasbarist. You see her on Piers Morgan. She was on Piers Morgan last night. Well, an episode of her debating someone on the Piers Morgan show was uploaded on Piers Morgan's channel last night. I understand they pre-record those interviews. But she was on the Piers Morgan show last night. And I listened to her. And you had Glenn Greenwald, I think that's his name, bring up the Haaretz article. And he said, Piers, they're killing people at aid distribution sites. I read about this on Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper, prominent Israeli newspaper. And their source is Israeli soldiers. Even Israeli soldiers are getting disturbed by Israel. What's going on? And what does Emily Schrader do? She is one of the top Hasbarists for Israel. She wasn't even born in Israel, by the way. She was born in LA. She says, yeah, that article is questionable. And if you look at, and I've heard this is what she says, but I've heard this argument before, and it's bullshit. She says, if you read the article in Hebrew, you get different stories. The article changes when you read Hebrew. It's not the same. So in other words, Haaretz has given lies in the English language, and then it gives a different article in Hebrew. So it's lying to the English-speaking world, and then it gives an entirely, and then it gives a very different type of article to the Hebrew-speaking world in Israel. And this was the second time that I heard this argument. This was the second time. So last week, some Hasbarist puts a comment on my video because I did a video recently talking about this atrocity these atrocities being done outside of these aid distribution centers. And some Hasbarist, and I know the guy was a Hasbarist because I checked out his YouTube channel and there's all this Israel stuff, pro-Israel stuff on the channel. He uploaded a whole bunch of pro-Israel videos. I challenged him to a debate. He never responded to me. But he posts this video on he posts this link to a video underneath my video. Doesn't give me a comment, doesn't explain to me the video at all, just puts the link. And you know you're dealing with someone who's bad faith when all they do is give you a link. Like, here you go, read it for yourself or watch it for yourself, right? So I clicked on it and I saw the title of the video. And the title of the video was, Military Expert Tears Apart Haaretz Article. And the video is about 30-something, 33, 36 minutes long or something like that. And I thought, okay, I'm actually going to watch this video because maybe I am wrong. Maybe there is a chance that I missed something in the publishing of this article by Haaretz. Maybe there's something that I don't know that has led me to a mistake. Perhaps, right? Perhaps. I could be wrong. I could be. So I watched the video. And you see this Hasbarist host, some woman, she looks like one of those Russian Israeli women. I don't know. I forgot her name, but looks Slavic, but she's Israeli. And she looks like a female Bond villain, although she's not the best looking one. But she says, oh, here we have this military expert from the UK. She says, here we have this military expert from the UK, and he's going to explain to us the problem with this Haaretz report. Now, mind you, The title of the video was Military Expert Tears Apart Haaretz Report. Did I see anyone tearing the Haaretz Report in any way in the entirety of this video? Answer, fuck no. This guy did fuck all to prove that the article was nonsense. So I in good faith, I watched the video. British guy, he's former British Special Forces, whatever. He knows all about war because he's been in war, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's his qualifications. Okay, fine. And he's like, well, Miss Hasbara, I'll explain to you my problems with the article. For one thing, it's saying that civilians were shot and killed outside of these food distribution centers. Well, first off, I want to say that it's always tragic when civilians die. And I want to just say that, you know, I served in Afghanistan for years, and I can tell you right now that there are situations where civilians are killed. Now, as tragic as this is, I will say that it does happen in war, and there were situations that took place when I was in Afghanistan, in which there were civilians around, and there were terrorists in the area, and they were adjacent to the civilian population, and somebody fired around, and the bullet would ricochet and would tragically hit a civilian, and that civilian would die. Now, it is very tragic, but these things happen in war.
The second thing I would look at is firing in the direction of and firing at are very different things. And firing in the direction of could mean kind of almost half of the compass circle. You know, that's pretty broad. And again, it's designed to make you think that crowd is being fired upon. Now, I did actually speak to some of the people I know in 252 who were the targets of this article for the most part, and they were adamant that it was warning shots that they're talking about. Now, that is common practice in every army. I've done it myself in Afghanistan, and actually the American unit I was with, we saw a really tragic outcome from a warning shot when one of the guys fired and it ricocheted and hit a small child. And these things happen in warfare, unfortunately. It's why war is horrible, and you should never start them in the way that Hamas did. But warning shots would normally be fired off to the flank or over the heads of civilians. And the idea is to get them to stop what they're doing. So in the instance I'm talking about in Afghanistan, the warning shot was fired at a moving car that was approaching a roadblock too quickly. So this is common practice in militaries around the world. Now,
holy shit, this was this guy's argument. That's the argument. The argument is, I served in war. Civilians die in war, which we all know is true. It is tragic when civilians die in war, which is true, right? Any sane human being would agree with that. And there were cases in Afghanistan that took place when I was in Afghanistan in which a bullet would ricochet and kill someone. Oh my God, this is the video. It's the argument. The argument is that bullets ricochet and kill people. That's not what the article is saying. The Haaretz article is quoting Israeli soldiers who are recounting how Israeli soldiers shot directly at people outside of aid distribution centers. It doesn't say, oh, there were some Hamas terrorists, they were shooting at us outside of the aid distribution centers, we fired back in self-defense, which is completely understandable, and a bullet hit something, and the bullet ricocheted and then killed someone at one of these food distribution centers. If this was the story, I would not have even done a video on it. I would have been like, okay, bullet ricocheted, there was a battle, terrorists were there, they were shooting at the soldiers, soldiers had no choice but to return fire, bullet gets ricocheted, someone dies. It's tragic, sad, depressing, gloomy, absolutely, but that's not a war crime. That's not even first-degree murder. Hell, that's not even second-degree murder. That's like basically manslaughter. I could be wrong. I don't know the exact legal terminology, but that's not first nor second-degree murder. I would not have even done a video. But he's like, oh yeah, Sheila, or whatever the fuck your name is, like, I was in Afghanistan, mate, and they're like terrorists shooting at us, right? We shot back at them, bullet ricochets, kills someone. That happens in war, sadly. Holy shit. This is your refutation? This is your Hasbara? And now you know why I keep telling, this is why I tell you people, Hasbara is dying. This is the best they can get. So I'm like, okay, wait, is that it? That's your argument? There's gotta be more. There's gotta be more. Where is it? Where's refutation? There has to be something there. So I'm listening, right? I'm listening intently, listening, waiting for the knowledge. Give me that Hasbara knowledge. Enlighten me with the Hasbara. Enlighten me with it.
I've spoken to IDF soldiers who have told me about war crimes that have happened and people have been shot who shouldn't have been. So, there are disciplinary issues, I think, at certain levels in the IDF. And one takeaway was actually the base I visited in Gaza really, really needed a sergeant major just to get a grip of it. It was a bit less disciplined than perhaps I would have expected to see from maybe a British unit. But overall, it's a very impressive army with some very impressive kits.
So then he says, now, if this actually indeed happened, the soldiers who actually did these things, or the commanders who ordered for these things to take place, should actually be investigated and they should be prosecuted.
So yeah, mistakes happen too. And yes, that does, when those mistakes involve weaponry, that does often involve people being killed. And both of those things I've just discussed ought to be investigated. And where there is negligence or criminality, then they should absolutely be prosecuted. But the key point is, that's what's happening.
This is your... I watched this, and I remember turning the video off thinking, Hasbara is dying. It's basically dead. It's on life support. It's on life support. That's the best thing. And the title is military expert or expert on war. I forgot the exact terminology, but roughly speaking, more or less, the title was something like, the title went to the likes of military expert tears apart Haaretz report. He actually said things that, to an extent, kind of back what the Haaretz report said. And by the way, not too long, or around the time that video was uploaded, Haaretz did a follow-up report. Or I would say around the time. Haaretz does a follow-up article explaining the making of the article and explaining why those soldiers decided to actually speak to Haaretz and recount these stories. And one of the authors of the article, Mr. Nir Hassoun, said that the reason, or at least one of the main reasons why these soldiers decided to speak to Haaretz about these atrocities is because they felt guilty. So Haaretz isn't saying, yeah, we made it up, it's bullshit, or yeah, maybe there was a mistake, sorry, Hebrew translation is different from the English, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. No, Haaretz actually backs its article, doesn't retract anything, and does an interview with Nir Hasson, in which Nir Hasson says, yeah, these soldiers decided to speak to me because they felt bad. Are you meaning to tell me that these Israeli soldiers actually have souls? And I'm not questioning that they have souls, I'm just saying rhetorically, are you meaning to tell me that these Israeli soldiers have more humanity than the Hasbaras? Yes. Yes. You can find, and this is why I say, guys, stay away from anti-Semitism, stay away from Nazism, don't get into people, because people start criticizing Israel, and then what happens a lot of the times, and I've seen this before, and we can probably talk more about this later, given the whole Grok scenario that's been going on, but what happens a lot of the times is that people go down this very dark rabbit hole into Nazi sympathy. And that's not what I want. I don't want to see that. I want to see criticism of Israel, because Israel has done atrocities. Just like we criticize the Third Reich for doing atrocities. Because we have to have a standard, a singular collective standard of morality. Without that standard, without having a single standard, we have double standards, and then we will do things like, oh, I don't know, give a pass to Hitler, but not a pass to Israel, because it's just Jewish people doing the atrocities. We shouldn't have that. We should be critical of Israel, not because of anti-Semitism. Right? We shouldn't be criticizing Israel, or people shouldn't be criticizing Israel because they love Hitler. Right? That means that you love one murderer because you hate another murderer, or because you hate the fact that Israel does atrocities. That's not right. We should be criticizing Israel because Israel is doing evil things. That's it. That is it. But these Israeli soldiers have more humanity than the Hasbarist. And someone said, "Oh, the article from Haaretz can't be trusted because, oh, the article in Hebrew is different from the one in English." And I heard this twice from two different Hasbaras. Really? That's your argument? Okay. So my father is an Arabic speaker. Arabic is very close to Hebrew. In fact, the modern rendition of the Hebrew language would not have taken place if it weren't for Hebrew scholars who actually looked into the Arabic language to find Hebrew words that corresponded with Arabic and vice versa in order to make a modern rendition of the Hebrew language. Hebrew and Arabic are very close. To get to explain it in a fast way. And so I found the Hebrew version of the article, used Google Translate, got an English translation of the Hebrew article, then got the transliteration from Hebrew to Arabic. So I had the English translation, then I also translated it into Arabic using Google Translate from Hebrew to Arabic, and then I got the transliteration. And for those of you who don't know, transliteration simply means you get the words of the language, but they're not spelled in the script of that particular language. Rather, they are spelled with English script. So, for example, you look at the Arabic word imshi, right? Imshi means go. Like, get out of here. Imshi, get out of here. You could present the word in Arabic script, but you wouldn't know how to pronounce it unless you can read Arabic. But then you could transliterate that word and you could spell that word using English words, so you could see it as I-S-H-M-I or I-S-H-M-Y, imshi. That's transliteration. And the reason why I got the transliterations of both the Hebrew and the Arabic was because I wanted my dad to see the Arabic words that correspond with the Hebrew words, because my dad he could read some Hebrew letters, but he's not fluent in reading Hebrew. So my dad looked at the Arabic text, looked at the Hebrew text, saw the transliteration and said, okay, he read the Arabic transliteration and he said, okay, he's reading it to me in English. He's translating it to me in English. He says, okay, yeah, we were ordered to fire on civilians. Civilians were running away. We were told to fire on them even though they were running away. Even though these civilians were no threat, we were ordered to fire on them. When we questioned the orders, the commanders would get angry at us, or they would get frustrated at our questions, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks at the Hebrew transliteration. He notices the words that correspond with the Arabic, because they're both very similar language, kind of like Spanish and Portuguese. And he's saying, yeah, that word corresponds with this. This word corresponds with that. Yeah, that word means this. This word means that. Yeah, it's the same thing in Arabic as it is in English, which means it's the same thing in Hebrew, as you could see, or as my dad could see from looking at the transliteration, proving that this argument that says that the Hebrew is different from the English, or that the Hebrew article is radically different from the English rendition of the article, is bullshit. And it's a lie. It's just a blatant lie. So again, here's another example of gaslighting. And so people see this gaslighting and they say, wait a second. They gaslit us about the Israel lobby. They gaslit us about Syria. They gaslit us about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction. They gaslit us about war crimes. Now, here you have the most blatant example of Israel doing massive war crimes at a systemic and systematic scale. And they're gaslighting us about that. Wait a second. They're just a bunch of liars. And now, guess what? People aren't trusting Hasbara. So Hasbara is dying, and any sort of attempt to revive Hasbara will fail. Any sort of attempt. People will never trust Israel. People will never trust Israel. You're never going to get the enthusiasm for Israel that Hasbara got in the early 2000s after 9/11. That's never going to come back. The train has been set. And that train is just going to keep on going. It ain't going to stop. Hasbara is dead, and Israel killed it. Bottom line. Hasbara is dead, and Israel killed it. That's it. This is the fault of Israel at the end of the day. This isn't the fault of Palestinian activism. This is not the fault of David Duke. This is not the fault of Alex Jones. And as much as I don't like David Duke, And as much as I am suspicious of Alex Jones, it's not their fault. This is the fault ultimately of Israel. Bottom line. I think one of the biggest signs of the death of Hasbara has been the massive decline of Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager went from being this massively humongous, ginormous internet personality, radio personality, to being someone that no one talks about. I mean, just he went from being this massive personality to being insignificant. No one talks about him. And they say, well, it's because he was injured, he fell down, he got paralyzed. You don't see him. And what happened not too long before Dennis Prager disappeared? Because Prager pretty much has vanished. I mean, he did some audio recorded messages here and there, but other than that, I mean, Prager was supposed to get back on the radio, I want to say in May, and he didn't. He said, nope, not going to go back on the radio, guys. Sorry, no, sorry, can't do it. Prager was declining before he disappeared. His show was declining, and his organization was declining. Now, how do I know this? Well, because here's the thing. Back in 2017, Dennis Prager went on to the David Rubin show. David Rubin is another Hasbarist, Israeli-American. He lives in LA. LA is filled with Hasbarists. LA is definitely the center of Hasbara, right? It's one of the big, or at least one of the big centers of Hasbara. Back in 2017, Prager gets on the Dave Rubin show, and he says, and I've talked about this a billion times, but I'll keep talking about it. He said, the Bible says, men, you're just as happy with boys, I don't mean 9-year-olds, 15-year-olds, just as a grown man is happy with a 15-year-old girl. He said that. I watched that on the interview, and I was so disturbed and so shocked by what I heard coming out of Prager's mouth. And I thought, let me check the comment section to see if there's anyone out there who actually noticed what I noticed. Nobody noticed a damn thing. Nobody. Which means in 2017, it was still a very good year for Hasbara. I did a video about it, and guess what? Everyone, except for a few people, went against me. Because everyone loved Dennis Prager. Prager was at the peak of his fame. Then, not too long ago, some guy, I forgot his first name, his last name is Marks. Some guy whose last name is Marks, he got famous because he did a video where he showed how he can disarm someone. He did a video about how he can take the pistol out of someone's hand. But this guy does an interview with the Sean Ryan show, which is a big fat podcast now. And he tells Sean Ryan about Dennis Prager. And he says, Dennis Prager refuses to call animated child pornography evil. Now, when Prager said this, he said it when he was on a Catholic podcast called Pints with Aquinas. When Prager said this, I immediately did a video on it exposing Prager and saying, you see, guys, I'm right about Prager. The guy is evil. 2017, he said, the Bible says, men, you can enjoy a 15-year-old boy just like you can enjoy a 15-year-old girl. He said that sick shit back in 2017. Fast forward to 2024, and there is Prager on the Pints with Aquinas show saying, no, animated child pornography is not evil. So then fast forward to some time later, and here you have this guy on the Sean Ryan show saying, yeah, Dennis Prager refuses to call animated child porn evil. And he explained to Sean Ryan that he took just the clip of Prager refusing to call animated child pornography evil, and he posted it on X. I want to say it was X. He posted it on social media. The video goes viral. And Mr. Marks tells Sean Ryan that he got a call from the CEO of Dennis Prager's university, Dennis Prager's organization. I think it's called Prager University, PragerU. And he recounted to Sean Ryan that Dennis Prager's own CEO told him that the Prager organization is losing money, it's losing donations because of that video. So the organization has been on decline. Not too long after that interview was done, Prager all of a sudden gets paralyzed, or he falls down, gets a serious injury, and he hasn't been on the radio ever since. And now Prager is insignificant. People see Prager, for a lot of people see Prager as just a weirdo. And that's what he is. Because Prager said some very sick things. So people are just disillusioned by the whole pro-Israel movement. People are just disillusioned by the whole the whole Zionist movement. Prager was one of the major figureheads, if not the biggest figurehead for Hasbara in the world. Massive. What happened to Prager? You don't see him anymore. Hasbara is dying. Now, to give you guys another example of the death of Hasbara, and I almost forgot this, but I just telling you guys that stuff about giving you guys that explanation of psychopathic behavior reminded me of this event. There is another event. There is another event that truly signifies the death of Hasbara, and that is some guy named Adam who is on the Patrick Bait David podcast. I forgot his last name. I think it's Sosnick. Patrick Bait David. Adam? Yeah, Adam Sosnick. This guy has made himself into a face of Hasbara. Guys, this guy has been killing Hasbara. Whether he knows it or not, whether he likes it or not, he has been killing Hasbara. Go watch the debate between Anna Kasparian and Adam Sosnick. They're arguing over whether or not America should go to war for Israel against Iran. And Adam Sosnick is saying, well, I'm not saying boots on the ground. I'm just saying America should do something like bomb Iran and blah, blah, blah. And Anna Kasparian is saying, if you do that, you're only going to escalate things to a point where a serious conventional war could actually commence. And she's telling Adam Sosnick, hey, Israel lied about Iraq. Israel lied about all sorts of stuff. Israel told us back in the 80s, not 80s, but back in the 90s, that Iran was just a week away from getting a nuclear bomb. So she's using legitimate observations. She's making legitimate arguments. But she's obviously very passionate about the subject. So she's raising her voice. I mean, it's a tense debate. And what does Adam Sosnick do? He takes out a stack of tissues and he says, oh, you need a tissue? And throws it at her. This is very typical behavior in Hasbara right now. She ignores it. She continues making her argument. And then moments later, Adam Sosnick says, I think you need something stronger. And he takes out a tampon and gives it to her. Read the comments underneath that debate and you tell me who people are supporting. No one's supporting Adam Sosnick because he was totally bad faith the entire time. He was debating in bad faith. And he just got people to dislike him even more. And that was a win for the people who are critical of Israel. And that was another death blow to Hasbara. And that death blow wasn't made by Anna Kasparian. That death blow was made by Adam Sosnick, a Hasbarist, an Israeli Hasbarist. Like I have said, Hasbara is dead and Israel killed it.